welcome all the amount of guests. I mean, just the space has just, I don't know if we could, I think it's standing room only, but welcome to the committee meeting. And it actually is a very exciting bill. So we are going to be hearing from Representative Caldwell as he presents the new version of House Bill 252. And I'll let him give us a little bit of the history of it and also present the bill. So it is yours. you can, I think you can just present it from right there.
All right. Okay, can everybody hear me? Perfect. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I bring to you House Bill 252 today, which is the J. Calvin Hill Jr. Act. If you remember this bill, we actually did pass this last year. We actually passed it out of the House, but it got caught in Senate rules like about 90% of the House bills did last year. So coming back with it again this year, we do have a little bit of an addition at the end, and I'll walk through that with you as well. But if you'd like, I can walk through the sections. I'm going to do it much more quickly than Representative Welch did last year. Give you a little bit of history on the bill for any of, actually, all of the members here were here on the committee back when Calvin Hill was chairing the committee. He was actually a delegation member of mine and was the chair of my delegation before he passed away in 2013. But he had issued an edict to the committee that we would do a mass mailing out to all of the departments and agencies in the state, see what they thought should come out of the law here in Georgia. And in response to that, we got about 65 letters back we had sent them out to, and personally I'll say an ungodly number of departments and agencies in this state. We got about 65 letters back asking us for different things. Hey, can you remove this provision? We haven't used it in half a century. This doesn't make any sense to have on the in the code any longer. So the whole goal of this bill really is to remove unnecessary and obsolete law, which is a little bit different than what we usually do in this committee, which is typically just let's correct grammar, let's move this punctuation point. We're actually removing and repealing law through this. So it was neat and historic when we did it last year. We're doing the same thing again, but I'm going to call it neat and historic again because this time we're going to get it through the Senate. So if you go through the bill along with me here, we'll go very quickly. Part 1, it's actually separated into parts that do different things. Part 1 throughout the bill addresses obsolete code provisions. In Section 1.1, we're just naming the bill. Sections 2.1 through 2.4. These are actually, this is archaic language. It was a program no longer being utilized through Title 12. We were asked to remove it. If you'll move on with me to 2.5, again, completely obsolete language under the Georgia Education Authority. They had sent in a request to ask us if we'd remove it, so we added a section there. If you move on with me a little bit further through, we get to page 6. So we're going to Section 2.6. Let me look over which one this is. Yep. Okay. So this is removing authorization for spending on public roads for planned communities. There was a time when we had a provision in the state that allowed you to leverage public funds for planned communities when you were building roads or water and sewage. This hasn't been used in decades. Again, asked us to pull it off because it's a useless code section. Section 2.8. This code's been in place since 1974. We were asked by the Office of Planning and Budget to remove it because it doesn't fit with the mission of the Office of Planning and Budget anymore. So they asked if we'd pull that out of the code for them. Section 2.9. We were asked by the Building Authority to remove this. It authorized them to put together a couple of projects on some facilities for Confederate soldiers' homes. This is clearly not relevant any longer. Section 2.10. This was a study commission that was put together that actually doesn't exist anymore. It was a transit governance study commission. They were put together. They studied as they were expected to do, and now they no longer study or meet. So we're going to pull them out of the code. You then get to see page 7, which is actually my favorite page of the whole bill because it's an entire page of crossed out words. Moving on to page 8, we've got part 3 now. Part 3 is entirely, the entire purpose is to remove unconstitutional provisions from the law. These are actually some interesting ones here. Section 3.1. This is language related to criminal defamation. The Georgia Supreme Court ruled this language unconstitutionally vague. So again, we're going to pull that code section out of the law because it's been struck down as unconstitutional. Section 3.2. The code sections 45-2-7 and 45-2-8 were both struck down as violating equal protection. So we're going to pull those from the code as well. Then we go into Part 4. This solely serves as a part to update terminology within the code. If you look at Section 4.1 for me, this is really just a name change requested by the Department of Ag. It updates the weights and measures law that we use in Georgia, updates that name to a modern standard. So that was requested by the Department of Agriculture. Moving on to Section 4.2. This was requested by DCH. It's replacing the phrase mental retardation centers, which is used extensively throughout the code. And it's replacing it with, I knew this off the top of my head a minute ago, and now I've lost it, with intellectual disability as opposed to mental retardation. Again, just updating, bringing it back into more modern phrasing. If you'll move on with me, we're jumping through a couple of sections there because all the way through section, I believe 5, we're just doing exactly that, replacing mental retardation with intellectually disabled. So again, if you see just how extensively that was used throughout the code. Okay, going into Part 5, Section 5.1. This is actually, believe it or not, removing the words Communist Party from the code. What we have in, we all take, as elected officials, we take what's called a loyalty oath. Within that loyalty oath, we're effectively swearing that we're not members of any subversive groups within the state. Our oath actually names the Communist Party. If you remember, on day 1 of the session, we did not take that part of the oath, and it's because we traditionally have not been taking that for quite some time. It's completely unconstitutional. You can't name a political party in the code and require that we swear that we're not part of a political party. Makes sense, sets a scary precedent. So we've removed that word. If you tend to be one of those people who believes that the Communist Party is a subversive group, then don't worry, you're already taking an oath that you're not part of one of those. But this at least removes that name so that you don't worry about whether or not we're falling within constitutional bounds. Moving from 5.1, again, we're 5.2 and 5.3, we're removing Communist Party. 5.4, you can actually see on lines 546 through 551 an example of what that oath looks like with the Communist Party, and it struck out. We get into Part 6 in Section 6.1 here. Okay, we're removing the local pre-clearance requirements that were required under the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court ruled unconstitutional. So again, removing unconstitutional provisions from the code. All of this was here last year when we approved this through and voted it out of the House. And by the way, it was passed by the House unanimously last year. Okay, and then that brings us to Section 7, Part 7, Section 7.1, which is the new portion of this bill. All of the last 4 pages of the bill from Section 7.1 through Section 7.2, but it takes up 4 pages. This is really simple. Department of Behavioral Health came to me yesterday, asked, hey, you guys have a code revision bill going, right? We couldn't get to Chairman Willard's bill quickly enough. We need some help, though. We had passed a bill for them last year that apparently referenced the wrong code section for them. So throughout the bill, we had referenced code section 4510.2. We'd intended to reference 4510.1, 1021. So we're fixing that through here. You can see that on line 635 there. We're also updating some language. We're going from saying each governing board to the governing board. Just fits better. There are several lawyers on here, so I'm going to leave it to you to tell me why that's good. Moving through there a little bit further, the last change on here is actually on the last page, on page 23. You'll see on line 760 where it says a manager or management team appoint pursuant to this. We're changing it to appointed because appoint pursuant doesn't make any sense. So again, just updating the wording there. The majority of this bill is actually repeal or removal of unconstitutional provisions. Last 4 pages here really are just grammatical updates and updates to code section references. Again, we passed this bill through committee last year unanimously, passed it through the House unanimously. Plainly, I think the Senate would have passed it unanimously too if they had just gotten it out of rules. Here's hoping that we can make that happen this year. Be more than happy to answer any questions. Quick reminder, Representative Welch, Representative Pack, and Chairman Hill really, and then Chairman Costas really did the legwork on getting this thrown together over the last 2 years. Didn't quite pull it through, so they've asked me if I'd carry it for them this year, which I certainly appreciate the honor of carrying a bill named after my good friend, Chairman Calvin Hill. So I will do my best to answer questions. I have been having fun. I was teasing with the chairman before this, having fun. It's one thing to vote on a 23-page bill and understand the provisions. It's a totally different thing to understand it well enough to go and explain and advocate for. So I've been getting up to speed. So here to do that for you guys if you have any questions. Otherwise, I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Representative Caldwell. We do have one question. Representative Stovall.
Stovall. Alexander.
Alexander, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank
Representative
you.
Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at page 6, section 210,
Yes, ma'am.
and that looks like it's a lot of information for transit and transportation. I do know we have a huge transportation bill coming. Does this have anything to do with that bill, or
No.
what did this come about with all of this different verbiage and language change for transit and transportation?
It's a great question, and I know everybody's alarm bells and red flags start shooting up when we see the word transit anywhere for all different reasons. Don't worry, this has absolutely nothing to do with the transportation initiative this year. It doesn't harm or help transit in any way, shape, or form in the state. Prior to a lot of the larger transit moves that have been made in the state, they had put together a governance study commission. That's what this was. That commission doesn't meet anymore. They'll never meet again. They have completely served their purpose, and yet we still have, well, as you can see, goodness, probably 50 lines of code referencing how they meet, why they meet, all those things within the law. Well, there's no one to reference it anymore because the commission doesn't exist. So all we're doing is removing code about a commission that isn't there anymore.
And I think this is also a practice that we started changing. Instead of putting study committees into code, we've just been forming them through House resolutions, because then we run into things like this.
Which is smart, except that then we won't have a fun 23-page repeal bill later.
That's
So.
true. Any other questions from members of the committee? Well, Representative Caldwell, this is probably the easiest 23-page bill that has ever been presented before a committee.
It was the easiest 23-page bill I've ever written.
Do we have a motion then? And a second. Very well. Any other discussion on the bill? I know we moved quickly, so if you do have any questions, please feel free. Any further discussion, we can certainly entertain it. Very good. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of giving a due pass to House substitute to House Bill 252, or the committee substitute to House Bill 252, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Very well. Congratulations, Mr. Caldwell. What we'll do now is just move it on to rules, and hopefully we will get through House rules as it is. Any other business to come before the committee? Very well. We do have a couple of other repeal bills that are in the pike in the process, and more than likely we will be meeting again next week, and they'll probably be just as brief. So thank you again for coming. We are adjourned.